have the community involved in the truth-telling process. So it was so exciting. The whole community's there. And anybody can speak. You know, there are 5 elders in the community that are appointed for the process. And so you can say, Judge, do you think he might be lying about that? Because at 3 o'clock, my neighbor said they saw him with a machete walking down the street or whatever it was. And you can see in the room, you can feel, as I was talking about that current of truth, you can feel when the community is sensing, wow, we're getting closer to the truth. And when you get the truth, the object of the truth process is not punishment, but then now we have a basis to reconcile because the truth is out. Now you have a chance to say, will you serve the community, or are you still going to hold those genocidal thoughts about, you know, the Tutsis are cockroaches? 70,000 people have been processed in this way, back, you know, who've committed murders, back in their communities, back doing healthy things to restore the faith and trust of the community. Wow! You think of that as a massive stressor, and facing it, and dealing with it, and telling the truth, and moving on. What that does to the social flow of energy. So they're now talking about Rwanda as the Switzerland of Africa. It has some issues, but the cleanest in terms of banking, least corruption. It's becoming a model. Why? Because they're transforming the story. So if you're having a bad hair day, get a grip of reality. You know what I mean? You know, we talk about stress. Yeah, I'm so stressed, and I've got all these emails. My cell phone keeps ringing. There is something in that a little optical delusion that we live in. And it's like, let's wake up to the planetary reality and the challenges we face, and yet the modalities that exist in human consciousness. So when you are really in that handshake, you become more dialogic, you become more healing. You're the wounded healer. You've been broken, you've been opened. Now you can heal others. You can expand the compassionate field of creative action in the world, right? You can respond. You're more subtle. Subtlety is so important, you know. For those of you who, and there are a number of you in this room who are interested in that energy field, it's not only energy, it's energy and consciousness. We're seeing the emergence of the dialogic, the subtle, the healing, compassionate human being, forgiving. That's what is emergent. That's what I see coming out of South Africa and the truth and reconciliation process in Rwanda. I actually even see it in Israel-Palestine, even though at the political level it's blocked. Out of the cauldron of these historical traumas and difficulties and challenges, a more spacious human being is emerging. And the subtle is so required. You know, I think of the truth games that get played when you try to enforce your truth and you have every dot in your truth line up. I call it rigor mortis of the truth. You know, you can prove everything. Every dot, you know, lines up. But the problem is there are no spaces in those dots for other people's truths. So the truth likes to breathe. And some evolutionary pressures push us into a place where truths polarize at first and then do wretchedly unpleasant things in that polarized state, and then learn slowly in evolutionary process that I can dance with truth. I think I told this group before about the women's movement in Cambridge, on either side of the abortion debate. You know, they went into dialogue for 6 months and came out of the dialogue and said, you know, we're even more passionately pro-choice or pro-life. People said, well, that dialogue didn't work. And they said, oh no, actually, We now take vacations together. We watch each other's kids. We found community. We found the ground of being under which supports the diversity of our truths. So our truths can exist in a ground of being that holds them. That's what we're looking for in evolutionary terms. That's what we're looking for in societal healing. And so that stress, that energy of the universe is not going to go away, is it? It's not as if somehow we get into this la-la land of everything's wonderful. I'm sorry for those of you who practice this and maybe think I'm being negative, but I call it the false positive. It's make everything look good. Don't look at the other realities. The false positive, I believe, is the negative in disguise. Whereas the true positive says, let me enter and encounter and rise to the challenge. And the challenge cannot be risen to if it's denied. If it's, you say, don't, climate change, how much denial do we have on climate change? Huge. We cannot really face that problem until we embrace it. So, the third phase that I talk about in the book around creative stress is the embrace. You know, many people like to quote Mevlana Jalaluddin Rumi these days, and everywhere I go, every conference practically, somebody stands up and says, "Out beyond right and wrong, there is a field. I'll meet you there." How many of you have? Yes, all these people who quote Rumi. And I say to people, now, don't get confused by that quote, you know, because I've studied deeply Rumi and other Sufi teachers. And he's not morally confused between right and wrong. Out beyond right and wrong, there's a field I meet you. He knew right and wrong very well. He knew that torture is wrong, right? You don't say out beyond right and wrong, so you go ahead and torture or whatever. So the right and the wrong, the polarities of right and wrong, are our training wheels of our moral development, our moral core. And what you start to get to in the non-dual state, beyond that, is the amplification of the moral core that extends into the realm of compassion, just as I mentioned with the shahaks. Just as I met Ali Abu Awad, Palestinian man whose 5-year-old daughter was shot in the back of the head with a rubber bullet by an Israeli soldier and killed, who says, I can do nothing to demean my enemy. That's his response. I can do nothing to demean my enemy. Why? Because otherwise it will diminish my moral core. Esther Golan, Holocaust survivor, who said to me, you know, I don't know about healing. I can't heal the Holocaust. Don't talk to me about healing the Holocaust. I can't forgive. Don't tell me about forgiving the Holocaust. I'm like, okay. And yet she's the lady I'm visiting because she's reaching out in dialogue to the Palestinians. And I say to her, what is it? It's that moral core. The moral core. You know, a soldier returning from Iraq talked about moral trauma. That what he saw and asked to do was traumatizing his moral being. And there's something that we can get to in human beings where we actually enter, I believe, the core of that moral being, which is non-polarized. It's really the transcendent state with regard to stress, because it always sees Ubuntu. I see in you me. I see another one of me. I am because you are. It is profoundly humanistic. It sees in the other what my mother used to say, there but for the grace of God go I, right? My mother could say that about anything, about anyone. Now I see many of you nodding your heads, yes, because that's deep into the moral core that says the human equation is somehow a connective celebration of beingness together. Right? That's a little awkwardly said, but I think you understand what I'm saying. So those unconditional states that start to emerge in the final embrace, like unconditional love. How many of us discovered in the process of what we thought was unconditional love that it was conditional? It's like, as long as you continue to keep those grades up, and as long as you continue to be the one who's really giving me consolation, you know, oh, the conditions get so subtle, you have to read the fine print, you know. Wow. But we can reach a state of unconditional love. It's a very high state. I believe that we don't get there in any shortcut. I don't think there's an easy way. The path does not get easier, but it gets deeper, richer, more profound. Which do you want, the quick and easy or the more profound? You know, the Sufis say, Mahmoud Abtal simply says, your heart must face its tests until some sweets turn bitter in the end. Your heart will never answer yes. When the bitter and the sweet become one, that's the place we're looking for, not the short circuit. That's the adventure of being a human, isn't it? That we are initiated into all of these challenges, and yet we are so glorious when we go through them and discover how big the story is. And my life is amazing at the moment because I'm doing a lot more of this international work. So I see more and more people like the Shahaks, like Esther Golan, like Ali Abu Awad, like Devota in Rwanda, whose children are slaughtered around her, and yet who forgives the killers in this most incredible moment of reaching out for forgiveness. People like Frances McEnany in Northern Ireland. I was doing a social healing workshop in Northern Ireland, and Frances, a little older than me, but she was sitting there, and you know, it's still in Northern Ireland, some of you ladies will like this, they carry those lovely little handbags, you know, a handbag. So Frances with her handbag, and I say to her, Frances, how did you get into this reconciliation work between Protestants and Catholics? She said, oh, well, about 10 years ago I was walking down the streets and they were shooting from the roof, and I got shot at. I was trying to get into my office, and one of the bullets went through my arm and into my chest and got lodged next to my aorta. And I lost pints and pints of blood, and I was driven to a hospital 15 miles away. And when I came to consciousness, the doctor was whispering, and my family was there, I'm trying to make her as comfortable as possible, but you know, there's no hope. And then the doctor says to her, you know, Frances, you've got a bullet lodged next to your heart. We cannot operate. Cannot take that bullet out. And I hear and many stories like this. About a month later, the doctor comes to her and says, Frances, you're going to have to get on with the rest of your life. And she says, what? With a bullet next to my heart?